Welcome to the Bedside Capitalism, the show where we sit down with leaders, builders, and those making big moves in the healthcare industry. I'm Tej, your host, and today we have Ivan Cason with us. He's the program director at Aspire Counseling Services, but his path has been anything but conventional. He overcame addiction, incarceration, and came out the other side, dedicating his career to helping others do the same. He recently got his memoir published. It's called Beyond the Street Lamp. Hi, Ivan. Nice to meet you. Congratulations on your book. Tell us more about it.
Actually started it over 20 years ago. It took me about 23 years to write, complete, finish. So,
Wow. Wow.
yeah. So, I mean, it's an interesting way it all unfolded. I mean, the original manuscript that I wrote was 200 and something pages. It was just short stories about events that happened in my life. And the book was lost over the years of my addiction and some of the things that I went through. And it's interesting because something that you write 20 years ago, and then where all that I've been through since then, the stories are true and it happened, but my perspective, I was like, I don't know how I feel about that, So, I mean, I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to do with the, so I left a lot of the stories out that I couldn't put my adult perspective on,
Yeah.
my journey. But I wanted there to be a lesson in the story. If there couldn't be a lesson, then I left it out. So the final version ended up being, was like 126 pages. So it went from 250 something to 126, but each story has a lesson or perspective from my adult self of the story I wrote 20 years ago.
Can you talk to me about, like, when you look back now in your life and your evolution, transition, redemption, however you want to look at it, like, what was that, like, one or two points in that journey where you realized that, hey, this is not my story maybe, but this is where I want to go with my life, and these are the things I need to change?
Yeah, no. So that's a good question, and so there was a few events towards the end, but in the book, I when I write about when I joined a gang. Immediately after I joined that gang, I knew it was a mistake. Like I knew, I'm like, what, and I pretended, to be tough and, mistaken fear for respect. A lot of but I knew it was a bad decision, but there was no way out. I mean, you see the movies, you get in, you either die or, I'm one of the few that just kind of, I mean, technically on paper, I'm still, in somebody's file, I'm still classified as, I mean, I never dropped out. But I just left on good terms, if per se. Like,
Wow.
I was incarcerated for many years. I didn't do anything bad. I just left. But in regards to like changing points, I mean, one of the chapters in the book, it's called The Yard. It's a turning point in my life. I overdosed in prison. And prison politics, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you feel morally. When you go to prison, you have to hang out with who, your groups. And so
I can imagine.
you have Southern Hispanics, you have the Caucasians, you have the African Americans, you have the Northern Hispanics, you have the others. These are all racially divided groups, but they do that for survival. And and when somebody moves, you move with them, whether you agree with it or not. I overdosed in prison. I'm from a Southern Hispanic gang, but I happen to be a Caucasian American. So it was kind of
I was about to ask that.
It was, I mean, that's who I grew up with. And so when I went to prison, I had a choice. It's like, you run this or that. So I ran with the Southern Hispanics who also were aligned with so it was harder for me. It was a lot harder for me than it would be for anybody else, a lot of trauma. I went in prison very young. First time I went to prison, I was 19 years old.
Gosh, wow.
So I was a kid, and I remember my very first day in prison, and like prison from being transferred. I met this guy I introduced, and he was doing triple life, and I shook his hand. I still remember how his hands felt. They were like they were huge, and I'm a kid. They were calloused, and he was doing triple life for homicide. And I was just look at this place that I wasn't supposed to be here. It was scary. I was scared. Every night I would just like lay in bed, and I would pray, and I would go to sleep praying. I'll fall asleep praying because I was scared, and then I wake up and do it all over again every day. And so again, I ran with the Southern Hispanics. I started getting tattoos. I got them all on my head, my face, because I wanted to look mean, right? But really I wasn't scared, but I wanted to. And so, but I was using drugs in prison. People think you go to prison. There's there's plenty of drugs in there. So at the end of that prison term, I overdosed on the yard,
Mhm.
um, and when I overdosed, the people, you think that the people I hung out with that were my friends would help me. All I remember is I got high and and I blacked out. When I woke up, there was two African American gentlemen administering CPR. I had vomit, so I think what happened was, I was asphyxiating on my vomit, and so
Yeah.
they set me up. They administered CPR, sat me up. I had vomit in my nose, all over my shirt, and they drugged me off to the side because there's gun towers. They didn't want to make a scene, and
Yes.
come in. And so they essentially saved my life. These two African American men that I don't know why they did it, because the way the prison politics are, they should have left me die. Who should have helped me were either been the Southern Hispanics or the whites.
Yeah. Your
You know what I
groups.
mean?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
didn't. They were too worried about hiding their knives and the drugs because they thought the guards were going to come in, because when someone overdoses, they'll
Get
come in
them.
and search the yard. But here were these
Yeah.
gentlemen, and so when I thought about it, it was when my mind started challenging all my, what is this really, I mean, not like it wasn't ingrained in me. That's I always knew, like, this isn't how I want to live. This isn't what I'm about.
I know.
But I did it to survive, right? But really, I was just like, this is not it. This is like these two men who, they should let me die. They saved my life. I'd like to say that's where I got clean and I got out, and I still have one more prison term left in me after that. But it was
Oh
different.
wow.
It was different after that. It was the last prison term. I got arrested for a firearm.
Hmm.
Most people are allowed to carry. I can't. I got pulled over. The sheriff, I remember, she asked me, she's like, "You got anything in the car?" And I already knew that because I was on parole, that they were going to search the
Hmm.
car. So I just told her, "Yeah, I have a gun under my seat." So she took me in. I was facing life in prison because of the three strikes law, because of my record.
My God. Wow.
The initial judge I had, he had sentenced me on my last time, and he was like, "This is three strikes." So my
Oh
lawyer
wow. Okay.
strategy was to keep waiving time, postponing the court case until we got, because the judges
A
rotate on
different
cases.
judge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. A
I got
different
in front
judge.
of a new judge, and yeah, I got in front of a new judge, and the district attorney said, "This judge is willing to strike your strike, and I'll offer you 7 years in prison." I was like, "That beats life." I was doing the math. I'm like, "All right,
Hmm.
I'll get out when I'll still be this. I still have a life." And but the judge did something that it blew my mind. He said, "You know what? I'm not gonna give. I'm gonna carrying a firearm carries 16 months for a regular person, 16 months in prison."
Right.
So what he did
Right.
was, because I have two strikes, because he struck my third one, essentially, he doubled it. He gave me 16 months times two, which was 32 months. And so I
Wow.
did 80% of 32 months. I did exactly 25 months to the day. I did not use drugs. I kind of was real quiet, stayed to myself. I was in shock, because when I first was charged, I thought I was going to get life in prison. So I thought about suicide. I was like, what do I do? Do I kill myself, or do I do life in prison? So it was just a really dark time in my life. So when I went to prison, I stayed low, you know, I got out, and that looking at life in prison and the overdose in the prison term before. When I got out of prison, I went to my parents' house, and I that's started going to school, and again, went after, picked school back up, and was back in college, and just the last time I used drugs was in February 1st, 2010. That was the day I
Oh
got
wow.
arrested.
Lift.
That was the
Yeah.
day I got arrested. So I celebrate the next day, February 2nd, 2010, is my sobriety day, which is, because that's the day I woke up in the morning. I didn't have any drugs in my system, right? So, and I haven't used or drank since. In this book, so there's a story about the overdose, the life in prison, and just little stories, but it has my adult perspective on it, and what was going on in what was going on back then, and then how I look at it now as a 48-year-old who's lived through all that, and how I view it now. So, um,
Yeah, and tell us more about the name you chose, because of course writing is one thing, but choosing a name that kind of summarizes your feelings, your objective of the story. Like, how did you come up with the very unique name
that's
of Beyond the Street Lamp? Yeah.
That's a great question. That's a great question, because initially, when I wrote the book 23 years ago, it was going to be Under the Street Lamp. That was a
No, yeah,
song. It's an oldie song by Joe Baton. It's the artist who sings "Under the Street Lamp." It's
I
a song
love
that
that
all of
now.
us, when we were kids, we used to listen to,
Uh-huh.
hanging out, kind of just doing nothing, right? So it was going to be "Under the Street Lamp." So when I started adding my adult perspective, I was talking to my wife. I'm like, I can't call it that anymore. I can't. So she said, well, why don't you call it "Beyond the Street Lamp"? Because you're beyond that now.
Mm.
So that's how the name came about for my book. So.
When you had these tough questions like whether to live or whether to be in prison and life imprisonment, was there somebody externally in your life who would kind of help you navigate, or was it internal strength, or like how did you kind of contemplate these things and decide what to do with your time and life, right, in those tough,
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
not
so I
tough
have
is an
children.
understatement.
Yeah, no, I have children, and I was, so they were a motivation. I mean, I think, like, what would they do? I mean, yeah, having a father that's in prison for life, but they still have a father, right?
Yeah.
Having a father that commits suicide, and ends it, that's selfish in a sense. I know sometimes the pain can be so much that the individual doesn't just see any other way out. And there was moments where I felt that pain. I just didn't want to hurt anymore.
Mhm.
And I dang sure didn't want to be in prison for the rest of my life. But my children,
Mhm.
my grandmother, who she passed away, but she, no
Bless
matter
her
what,
soul.
yeah. So but I got to bury her. That was one of my fears, she would die when I was in prison, and I wouldn't be able to go to her funeral. But I was able to go to her funeral. I was out and living right, and so I got to bury her. And I went, and right in the book, I went when my uncle passed away. I went and visited her grave in New Mexico, and snow had covered her grave. I had to find it, and because it didn't have a headstone, and so moved the snow away. My brother told me where it was. I put my business card. I said I made it, and I put it where her grave was. And so she used to
Wow.
write me no matter what, no matter what. Never judged me. I even lived with her for a little when my parents couldn't. They didn't know what to do with me, so they sent me to my grandma's house in New Mexico, and that was like one of the best. It was getting away from the life that I had created in LA, got me out of it. And I thought, for the first time, I'm going to be able to, like, live a normal life, and then it was when my parents
Mm.
brought me back that I went right back to that stuff. But so I had a little moment of peace living with my grandma. But so for her, I did, she motivated me when I didn't want to die, or, she's always been a motivation for me. But my children, and then my faith. So, um, yeah, so those are the things. Yeah. Kept
Wow.
me going.
And when you
Kept
look at the different chapters, is there a favorite chapter of yours which you would like to recommend or kind of give us a tease about? Like what kind of is the maybe the strongest chapter you feel is something we can all relate to maybe?
Yeah, no, I mean, so I've got a lot of feedback from mothers who see themselves in my mom, right?
Wow.
So even if, like, you didn't have addiction, but just that you don't know how to, because so when you see a kid, right, and they're being
Hmm.
angry and rebellious, right, you're thinking, like, oh, I don't want, I don't know what to do with them. I was that kid, but really I was just scared. I was just scared, and I didn't know how to, and I didn't know the gravity of the consequences, that my actions. I didn't know that the consequences. I didn't have an understanding of the consequences. So a lot of parents have contacted me, said, I see myself in your mom. There's a chapter in the book. It's called the yard. No, not the yard. It's
Hmm.
the fight. Excuse me, the fight. And it's about a schoolyard fighting for middle school. Me and a buddy of mine, we beat up another kid. Well, they were fighting one on one, and I jumped in. I got suspended, but yeah. So it's just a schoolyard fight. But fast forward 20 something years, right? I'm in Kern County in Bakersfield. His mom, he's in prison doing life. The same kid that
Wow.
he's in Kern County. So it's like I got the chills right now. So I get a call. I come in the office, and his mom got a message saying, "Hey, call." He saw me on a commercial for Aspire, on the TV from his cell, and he called on
My
three
God.
way. So I called his mom, and he got struck out. He's doing 25 to life under the same thing, and so two boys on a schoolyard in middle school who got in a fight with this, both ended up in Kern County. We took different paths, but we both ended up in the same city, but just differently. And that could have been me.
Absolutely.
in the cell,
Yeah.
so that's one of the stories that I think I lean towards, and then the story I was telling you about where the overdose, the yard, because one of the things I'll add is my wife's African American, right? So
Hmm.
I look at my son, and I don't want to get emotional right now. I look at my son
I
who
can
is
imagine.
he's mixed, he's mixed, and who would have thought, right? Because I'm running in prison, I've been in riots, not because I liked it or wanted to, because I had to, right? But here I am. I got saved by two African Americans that weren't supposed to save me. I married a beautiful African American woman, and my son Ezekiel, who's mixed, it's
Beautiful
just
name.
I look at
Yeah.
him now, and I'm just like, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, it just he's my reason now that you know life can be different. I mean, I one of the things I don't like is when people say, because I made it, you made it, because everyone's journey is different. I don't like saying that, because that's
Exactly.
me
Yeah.
diminishing what they're going through, right? I don't know their story.
So
But
true.
what I can tell you is that there is a way out, no matter what your story is.
A curious question: is you're transitioning from that end of somebody going through it all and somebody helping people going through it? Is
Mhm.
that story part of the book, or is it something you have done after writing the book? Like, just tell me about the transition from, in your career right now. You're literally helping people who are maybe going through it, or maybe worse, something better. But yeah, tell me about
Yeah,
the choices you
yeah.
have made to. Yeah.
It's amazing, just I've been in the field for many years. I've been with Aspire for 11 years. I've been in the field for 13. Worked at a couple other
Wow.
organizations. I love Aspire. It's where I want to stay. And I run our admissions department. I still answer the phones. I'm that first line of communication on a couple of days. I love it. I love it when somebody calls in and they're hurting, and I just listen. Because I know a lot of people they don't feel heard. And and who else easier to tell your secrets and problems to than a stranger? Who hears you, and I hear them,
Exactly.
and then I give them options. I give them hope. I don't say, because I made it, you can make it. I just say, hey, here's your options, right? I hear your pain, but you know what? People make it on the other side of it, and this is what we can do from here. So, um, um, I've done a lot of different things in my counseling career. I ran recovery groups. I worked with corrections officers who, at
Wow.
one point, some corrections officers have refused to work with me, which I don't take
Yeah,
personal. I
I
get
can.
it. I get it. I mean, why, but some of my best work, was with a corrections officer who we look at each other as humans, right? And just humans that had some pain. So, I mean, I'm able to use my past. I can see a kid who comes in who wants to be tough, and I can see him for what he is, and, and I
Yeah.
don't judge him. I just meet him where he's at, and kind of figure out what I'm going to do to be able to try to help this individual, whether it's an adult or a kid. Or I see addiction as a disease, and it affects everybody, whether you are a gang member or a politician, or correct it just or just a stay-at-home mom. I mean, it has no,
Absolutely.
so and it looks different on everybody. But I guarantee you, if you stop using, your work production is going to double, triple, and you're going to be
Yeah.
happier.
Yeah.
You may just be walking around in a shell, pretending like you're happy, but the worst thing you could do is walk through this life and not be able to feel anything that's real. And that's what drugs mask everything. I'm able to see people for who they are because of my past
Who they are.
experiences. Then use my education through school and my experience to kind of make an evidence based treatment recommendation and plan. So those two things combined really have been helpful in the field, and I've seen some good outcomes as a result of it. So
What is that one thing you think in this industry or in this space that you feel the healthcare providers get it wrong? They don't understand something which you have understood because of your life experiences.
it's a great question. That's a great question. There's two things that come to mind as soon as you ask that. One is mental health and substance abuse providers become stuck in their ways. They don't want to be teachable.
Mm.
Treatment evolves, and treatment evolves, and there's constant breakthroughs, research, what works. And one of the hard things is if a facility or individual provider or a company wants to just stay stuck in what they're doing, because there could be a great, for instance, MAT, medication assisted therapy, right?
Right.
Treatment. A lot of people are like, no, that's awful, right? I'm raising my hand when it first came out. I'm like, why are we going to put, but it saves lives and it has its place.
Mm.
And again, if you look at someone as an individual who's tried everything, I'm using, like Suboxone or Subutex, or, I've seen people succeed on it, so being stuck and not willing to to grow with the research, that's one of the huge things in the field that hold a lot of providers from progressing into being great providers, whether it's
Got
an
it.
individual or organization. And another thing, this is more on the substance use side. I meet a lot of counselors that believe self-disclosure is a modality, and I cannot say
Mhm.
this enough that it's not. They teach this in school, that self-disclosure
Yeah.
is used only if it's going to benefit the client, right? Not, because I interview people all the time, and they're,
Thank you.
for positions. And one of the things, as soon as I ask them what's their counseling style, and they're like motivational interviewing, cognitive behavior, right? Some of them just be like, well, I want to tell them about my past. That's go that's they got a good heart, and I'm not, hopefully they'll, but self-disclosure is not a modality, and it hurts, I think, a lot of clients. It minimizes what
Mm.
they're going through, doesn't make them feel like they're heard, and it's just not
Yeah.
effective. It's not effective, so those two things really.
The final part of the interview was planned to be like a fun 5 questions,
Yeah.
and these are quick fire.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
so
All right.
don't think too much. Let it out. What is that one song that has no business being in your playlist, but it is there and you love it?
One song that no business being on my playlist, and I love it. It's a song by Carrie Underwood. I don't know the name of the song, but it's talking about taking her Louisville Slugger, and about the guy cheating on her. When no one's around him in my car, I'm singing the Carrie Underwood. When someone pulls up next to me, I'm like,
What is that one terrible advice somebody has given you, but it actually worked out for you?
terrible advice that someone gave to me that actually worked out. Joining a gang, because it was a horrible thing. I mean, and it was horrible, but I look back now, and I'm not mad about anything that happened. I don't, but all the events that happened, all the heart, it's who I am today. So would my wife always tells me, would we even be together? Would we have ever met had you not, and so, yeah, I guess
Mind blowing.
someone told me
Yeah.
to join a gang, and that was a horrible advice, but look, I mean, now I'm married, and great career. So
What is that one rule of life you might have learned earlier in life, but you broke it and it worked out for you?
a rule, I always been told I needed to explain myself, right? And I learned
Mm.
that I don't need to explain. I'm not responsible for how somebody receives me. And it's hard, because as human beings, we want to justify, or especially when we're accused, but I feel like, if we just give it air, we just give it room to breathe. So these days, I a rule that I was always taught to, you were accused, you did something, or somebody, you need to tell your side of the story. I don't need to tell my side of the story. I'm not responsible for how they receive what I say. I'm responsible for carrying myself in an honest, a truth, living way. And once it leaves my mouth and they hear it, that's they can, and not everybody's gonna like me. That was one of the hard things about
Yeah.
releasing. I know it's a rapid fire question. Was releasing the book. I
No,
I
no, fine.
knew I had to say, when I'm ready, when I know, because once you release, you open yourself up, especially your life story. People are gonna be, whatever,
Judging you. Yeah.
and I have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And I said, is it time? Are you gonna be? And I'm in the best place mentally that I've probably been my whole life.
If your life story can actually now become a movie, hopefully, who would you like playing your character? Like which actor?
Keanu Reeves. I watched I was on the West Coast Symposium on a conference, and I was watching the movies in the hotel room. John Wick, and I was like, he's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, absolutely.
And he's a great
That is
guy.
kick ass.
Keanu Reeves is a great guy.
Yeah.
He just, I mean, for what I know about him, and I'm not big on celebrities, but from his
Yes.
story,
Yeah.
my wife would probably say Shia LaBeouf. How he gets into character, like
Yes.
he'll
Method
live that
acting.
life,
Yeah.
right? Like, I guess the movie that
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
just did not too long ago, the tax collector, he actually joined the gang
Yes.
himself,
Yes.
just to, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. I heard about
that's
the. Yeah.
commitment, so, um, yeah, but no, Keanu Reeves, because he just seems like an
Okay.
overall great guy,
If you could put one phrase or lesson or a sentence on a huge billboard for everyone in the world to see, to take away, or maybe remember or wake up to, what would that be?
Your worst choice in life does not define your identity, does not
Hmm.
have to define your identity. Your worst choice in life does not, because I realize that, I mean, it's just your worst choice in life does not have to define your identity and who you are. Because once
Wow.
we make those choices, we get stuck in them. We think we can't move forward. A lot of people will hold themselves back, and then in those moments when they want to move forward, they start asking people what they think, right? They ask for permission, and that's where they mess up, because then not everyone has your best interest at heart, and they start asking you questions and have you second guessing yourself. So don't ask permission, just do it. But your worst choice, your worst choice doesn't identify your identity.
One final question, and this is just because maybe we are an AI company.
Mhm.
Give us one thing AI can actually do well in the world, maybe in the industry, in your life, whatever, and one thing it shouldn't get into.
Humans are emotional.
Yeah.
AI is logical, right?
Yeah.
So asking when somebody's emotional, you want to process that with a therapist. I don't believe in an AI therapist, but I
Hmm.
also believe that if here's never make a permanent decision off a temporary emotion. So AI, if you want to make a decision and you're in an emotional state, you ask AI the question, they're going to give you a logical answer, a non-emotional answer. I use AI. I ask it
Yeah.
a lot of questions, especially if I'm in an emotional state, because I need a logical answer. And I'm not trying to
Yes, I know
process
what
my
you mean.
emotions. I do that with my therapist and my friends. But if I need, I don't want to be reactive. I want to be, and so I'll ask AI, because AI is not going to be emotional. It's going to give me the most
Yes.
logical outcome based on the data. I hope I answered
Thank
it.
you. Thank you, Ivan. I mean, this is
Thank you.
amazing. There's so much to take out of this conversation, so many quotes, so many lessons of life, so many fun things that you talk about so reflectively in your life. I
Mhm.
wish you the best with your book.
You've been great. The questions were
Thank you.
great. The questions were
Thank
great,
you.
and I've enjoyed this conversation.
Wishing you the best for everything you do. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.